The desert wind carried whispers across Bagram Airfield that morning, but none louder than the snickering from the mechanic bay. Captain Zara, Phoenix. Nakamura had heard it all before, the jokes about diaper duty, the comments about her 5-year-old daughter's drawings taped inside her F-16's cockpit, the way conversation stopped when she walked past carrying lunch boxes instead of beer. What they didn't see was the intricate tattoo hidden beneath her flight suit's collar, a symbol that would make even the most decorated colonel fall silent in recognition. The mystery began 3 weeks earlier when Phoenix received orders that made no sense. While her squadron prepared for routine patrol missions over the Hindu Kush, she was reassigned to fly solo reconnaissance sorties along coordinates that didn't appear on any standard map. The briefings were classified beyond her clearance level, delivered by stone-faced intelligence officers who spoke in riddles about historical verification and legacy confirmation. Her commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, seemed uncomfortable every time he handed her the sealed mission packets, his eyes lingering on something just below her neckline before quickly looking away. The other pilots noticed the special treatment with typical military grace. Maybe they think single moms need easier assignments, chuckled Captain Rodriguez during the morning briefing. Less chance of leaving little Emma an orphan. The laughter rippled through the ready room like shrapnel. Phoenix absorbed it with the same stoic expression she'd worn through 2 combat deployments, 3 custody hearings, and countless nights assembling toys while studying flight manuals. But Lieutenant Mitchell, fresh from the academy with his pressed uniform and regulation haircut, took the mockery further. I heard Phoenix get special missions because they're worried about her maternal instincts kicking in mid-flight, he announced to his cluster of equally green pilots. Can't have her going soft when the shooting starts. More laughter, sharper now. Even some of the senior enlisted crew exchanged knowing glances. Phoenix continued her pre-flight checks with mechanical precision, each switch and gauge receiving the same methodical attention she gave to Emma's bedtime routine. The F-16C Fighting Falcon gleamed in the Afghan sun, its General Electric F-110GE-129 engine humming with restrained power. This particular aircraft, tail number 910403, had been specially modified with enhanced communication arrays and sensor packages that Phoenix couldn't discuss with anyone, not even her maintenance chief. As she climbed into the cockpit, the familiar ritual began. Helmet on, visor down, comm check. Tower, Phoenix requesting clearance for departure. The tower's response crackled through her headset, but something in the air traffic controller's voice sounded different today, respectful, almost reverent. Even he had heard the whispers about her mysterious assignments. What none of them knew was that today's mission would finally reveal why a decorated colonel had personally requested Phoenix's service record, and why her seemingly simple reconnaissance flight carried the highest classification level in the Air Force. The pre-flight briefing had been unusually tense that morning. Intelligence Officer Major Patricia Voss stood before the projection screen with the rigid posture of someone carrying secrets too heavy for her rank. Phoenix sat alone in the front row while other pilots filtered in for their standard mission assignments, their casual banter a stark contrast to the classified atmosphere surrounding her briefing. Captain Nakamura, Major Voss began, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. Today's flight path takes you through sectors 7 through 12 along the Pakistani border. The map displayed on screen showed a serpentine route through mountain valleys that Phoenix had never flown before. Red zones marked areas of known Taliban activity, but more concerning were the unmarked regions highlighted in amber, territories that officially didn't exist in their operational database. Phoenix studied the route with professional detachment, mentally calculating fuel consumption and emergency landing sites. Her training had taught her to compartmentalize, to focus on the technical aspects rather than the political implications of her orders. "Row status, ma'am," she asked, referring to the rules of engagement that would govern any potential combat situations. "Observe only," Major Voss replied, but her hesitation suggested layers of complexity beneath those two words. Your aircraft has been equipped with specialized recording equipment. Document everything you see, especially any ground installations or vehicle movements in grid squares Delta 4 through Delta 7. She handed Phoenix a sealed packet containing additional instructions. These are to be opened only if you encounter unexpected circumstances. The phrasing sent a chill down Phoenix's spine. In military parlance, unexpected circumstances could mean anything from mechanical failure to enemy contact to discovering something that wasn't supposed to exist. She tucked the packet into her flight suit's chest pocket, feeling its weight against her heart. As the briefing concluded, Phoenix noticed Colonel Marcus Webb entering the ready room. His presence alone commanded attention, a career fighter pilot whose chest displayed ribbons from conflicts most people had forgotten. But when his eyes met hers, something passed between them that made her blood run cold. Recognition. Not of her as a pilot, but of something deeper, something connected to the tattoo hidden beneath her flight suit. The walk to her aircraft felt longer than usual, each step weighted with anticipation and dread. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Thompson, conducted the final inspection with unusual thoroughness. "Everything looks good, Captain," he reported, but his normally jovial demeanor seemed strained. "Just be careful up there. This bird's carrying some sensitive equipment." Phoenix performed her exterior walk-around inspection, checking every rivet and panel with trained eyes. The F-16's sleek profile embodied decades of aeronautical evolution, 26 feet of wingspan carrying sophisticated avionics systems capable of multi-role operations. Today, however, additional antennas and sensor pods gave the aircraft an unfamiliar silhouette. Whatever she was being asked to observe, the Air Force wanted comprehensive documentation. Strapping into the ejection seat, Phoenix went through her startup checklist with mechanical precision. The Pratt & Whitney engine spooled to life with a whine that gradually deepened to a throaty roar. Around her, the cockpit's multifunction displays illuminated with streams of data, altitude, heading, fuel status, weapons systems. All normal, yet everything felt different. "Tower, Phoenix requesting taxi clearance," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the uncertainty gnawing at her stomach. Today's mission would either be routine reconnaissance or something that would change everything she thought she knew about her service, her squadron, and the classified symbol PERM, neatly etched into her skin just below her collar line. The takeoff roll felt different that morning, not the familiar surge of acceleration Phoenix had experienced hundreds of times, but something heavier, more consequential. The F-16's afterburner kicked in with its characteristic roar, pressing her back into the ejection seat as the runway markers blurred past her canopy. Bagram's dusty landscape fell away beneath her wings, replaced by the stark beauty of Afghan mountains that held secrets older than recorded history. "Phoenix, you are cleared to assigned altitude. Proceed direct to Waypoint Alpha," came the tower's transmission. The controller's voice carried an unusual formality, as if he understood the significance of her departure. Phoenix acknowledged with standard radio protocol, but her mind was already shifting into the analytical mode that had kept her alive through 2 combat tours. The first leg of her route took her northwest toward the Pakistan border, following river valleys that ancient armies had used as invasion corridors. Through her heads-up display, Phoenix monitored the terrain below while her aircraft's modified sensors began their silent recording. The equipment hummed with electronic activity she couldn't hear but could feel through vibrations in the airframe. Whatever intelligence the Air Force wanted captured, they were taking no chances with incomplete documentation. At Waypoint Alpha, Phoenix banked left into a valley her maps designated as uninhabited. The landscape below told a different story. Tire tracks crisscrossed the valley floor in patterns too organized to be random, and what appeared to be natural rock formations revealed geometric shadows when viewed from altitude. Her training screamed caution, but her orders demanded thorough observation. Bagram Control, Phoenix reporting visual contact with ground activity at Delta 47, she transmitted, using the coded language from her briefing. The response came not from the tower but from a different voice entirely, deeper, more authoritative, with the crisp pronunciation of a senior officer. Phoenix, this is Reaper Control. Continue mission as briefed. Maintain calm discipline. The new call sign sent recognition through Phoenix like an electric shock. Reaper Control wasn't a standard air traffic designation. It was the classified command center for black operations, missions that officially didn't exist. Her simple reconnaissance flight had just revealed itself as something far more complex. Banking around a mountain peak, Phoenix caught sight of her primary objective. The valley below stretched for miles, its floor dotted with structures that definitely weren't on any map. Concrete bunkers, communication towers, and what appeared to be aircraft hangars were arranged with military precision. Most concerning were the surface-to-air missile installations positioned to control the valley's approaches. Whoever operated this facility took security seriously. Phoenix's finger hovered over her camera controls, documenting everything while maintaining the careful distance her orders specified. Through her targeting pod, she could see vehicles moving between buildings, their movements suggesting an active military installation. The question that burned in her mind was simple: whose military? The sealed packet in her chest pocket seemed to pulse with its own urgency. According to her briefing, she wasn't supposed to open it unless encountering unexpected circumstances. Looking down at an undocumented military facility in a supposedly empty valley definitely qualified as unexpected. But something held her back, a sense that opening those orders would cross a threshold from which there might be no return. Her radio crackled with another transmission from Reaper Control. Phoenix, extend observation time by 30 minutes. Document all visible personnel and equipment. The voice paused before adding, and Phoenix, your discretion is appreciated. Military speak for keep your mouth shut about what you're seeing. The mountain peaks around Phoenix began to take on an ominous quality as she extended her observation orbit. Each pass revealed new details about the facility below, details that raised more questions than they answered. The hangars were large enough to accommodate significant aircraft, and the runway she'd initially missed appeared capable of handling everything from transport planes to fighter jets. What kind of operation required this level of infrastructure in a valley that didn't officially exist? Through her targeting pod, Phoenix zoomed in on personnel moving between buildings. Their uniforms didn't match any NATO forces she recognized, but their movement patterns suggested military training. Vehicle markings were either absent or obscured by dust and distance. She began to understand why her mission required such high classification. She was documenting something that could shift the entire balance of power in the region if it fell into the wrong hands. Reaper Control, Phoenix requesting guidance on row modification, she transmitted carefully. Military protocol dictated that reconnaissance missions could become combat operations if circumstances warranted, but her current orders specifically prohibited engagement. The facility below represented a significant security concern, yet she was limited to passive observation. The response came after a long pause. Negative, Phoenix. Maintain current row, document and withdraw as scheduled. But there was something in the controller's tone that suggested frustration, as if he wanted to give different orders but was constrained by higher authority. Phoenix found herself wondering how many people knew about this valley, and more importantly, who had authorized a facility this substantial to operate without official acknowledgement. Banking into her final observation pass, Phoenix noticed movement that made her blood run cold. A surface-to-air missile installation was rotating its radar dish directly toward her position. Her threat warning system remained quiet, suggesting they weren't actively targeting her, but the message was clear. They knew she was there, and they possessed the capability to enforce their security. Her hand moved instinctively toward the sealed packet in her chest pocket. If being painted by hostile radar didn't qualify as unexpected circumstances, nothing would. But something made her hesitate, a nagging sense that opening those orders would reveal something about her own mission that she wasn't prepared to confront. Instead, she keyed her radio for another transmission to Reaper Control. Reaper Control, Phoenix is being observed by ground-based air defense systems. Request immediate guidance. The professional calm in her voice masked the adrenaline spike that accompanied any threat to her aircraft. Below her, the missile installation continued its slow rotation, tracking her movement with mechanical precision. Phoenix, you are cleared to depart assigned area. RTB immediately. Return to base. The three letters every pilot understood as non-negotiable. But as Phoenix banked away from the valley, she caught sight of something that made her forget about missile threats and classified facilities. On the valley floor, arranged in formation near the main hangar complex, sat a collection of aircraft that shouldn't have existed in this location. Two F-16 Fighting Falcons, their tail markings obscured but their silhouettes unmistakable. More concerning were the larger aircraft parked nearby, transport planes, and what appeared to be refueling tankers. This wasn't just a hidden facility. It was a fully operational airbase with capabilities that could project power across the entire region. Phoenix began to understand that her reconnaissance mission had uncovered something far more significant than intelligence gathering. She had discovered a ghost squadron operating in plain sight. The flight home would give her time to process what she'd seen, but first she had to survive the return journey. Someone had invested considerable resources in keeping this valley secret, and they demonstrated both the awareness and capability to eliminate threats to that secrecy. Phoenix pushed her throttle forward and pointed her nose toward home, carrying images and questions that would haunt her long after she landed. The return flight to Bagram stretched longer than usual, each mile weighted with the implications of what Phoenix had discovered. Her F-16's fuel gauges showed adequate reserves, but she found herself constantly checking them, a nervous habit from her early days as a pilot when every mission felt like it might be her last. The Afghan landscape passed beneath her wings with deceptive tranquility, hiding the reality that she had just documented something that could reshape regional security assessments. Her radio remained unusually quiet. Standard protocol called for regular check-ins during extended flights, but Reaper Control seemed content to let her make the journey home without communication. Phoenix interpreted this silence as either complete trust in her capabilities or calculated distance from whatever she'd witnessed. In her experience, military silence usually indicated the latter. The sealed packet in her chest pocket had grown heavier during the flight, its presence a constant reminder of information she hadn't yet accessed. Phoenix's training emphasized following orders precisely, but her instincts as both a pilot and a mother demanded understanding potential threats to her safety. The facility she'd observed represented capabilities that could endanger not just military operations but civilian populations across the region. How could she return to base with this knowledge and simply file a report without understanding the full context? Banking around a familiar mountain peak that marked the halfway point to Bagram, Phoenix made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She reached into her chest pocket and broke the seal on her additional orders. The single sheet of paper inside contained information that made her hands tremble despite her years of combat experience. The orders weren't additional reconnaissance instructions. They were biographical information about herself, her service record, family background, and most shocking of all, a detailed analysis of the tattoo beneath her collar. The document identified the symbol as a classified military insignia belonging to a special operations unit that had been disbanded 15 years earlier. According to the file, only 12 people had ever been authorized to wear that particular marking, and Phoenix's father had been one of them. Colonel James Nakamura had died in a training accident when Phoenix was 8 years old. The official report cited mechanical failure during a routine flight exercise, but her additional orders suggested a different truth. Her father had been part of a classified program involving international cooperation with allied nations on sensitive reconnaissance missions. The valley she just observed was apparently one of several facilities established during his era of service, and someone wanted to know if his daughter had inherited more than just his flying abilities. The implications struck Phoenix with physical force. Her assignment to this mission wasn't random, it was a test. Someone with significant authority had wanted to observe her reaction to discovering a facility connected to her father's classified service. The mockery from her fellow pilots about special treatment suddenly took on a different meaning. They weren't wrong about her receiving unusual assignments, they simply didn't understand the reason. Her radio crackled with an incoming transmission. Phoenix, Bagram Tower requesting ETA for approach. The familiar voice of the air traffic controller carried no hint of the morning's respectful tone, suggesting that whatever knowledge he'd possessed about her mission was compartmentalized from her return. Phoenix calculated her remaining flight time and responded with standard protocol, but her mind was racing through the implications of her discovery. Landing at Bagram would mean debriefing with intelligence officers who already knew more about her background than she did. The questions would be probing, designed to assess not just what she'd observed, but how she'd process the information. Phoenix realized that her performance during the next few hours would determine whether she remained a regular squadron pilot or became involved in operations that officially didn't exist. The base appeared on the horizon, its familiar layout offering no comfort against the uncertainty of what awaited her on the ground. The approach to Bagram felt surreal after what Phoenix had discovered about her mission's true purpose. The runway stretched before her like a judgment strip where her future would be decided based on how she handled the next few hours. Her F-16's landing gear locked into position with mechanical precision, but her emotional state was anything but precise. The revelation about her father's classified service had recontextualized her entire military career, casting every assignment and promotion in a different light. As she taxied toward the squadron's maintenance hangar, Phoenix noticed an unusual gathering of personnel. Colonel Webb stood with several officers she didn't recognize, their crisp uniforms and serious expressions suggesting they weren't standard base personnel. Master Sergeant Thompson directed her to a parking spot away from the main flight line, his hand signals more formal than usual. Everything about her return indicated that this debrief would be unlike any she'd experienced. The engine spooled down with its familiar whine, but Phoenix remained in the cockpit longer than necessary. Through her canopy, she could see the welcoming committee approaching with the measured pace of people carrying significant authority. The sealed packet's contents had revealed one secret, but she sensed that the full truth was still waiting to unfold. Her father's legacy was apparently more complex than a simple training accident, and her own service had been guided by forces she was only beginning to understand. Climbing down from her aircraft, Phoenix removed her helmet and faced the assembled group. Colonel Webb stepped forward with an expression that mixed respect and caution. "Captain Nakamura," he began, his voice carrying the weight of classified knowledge, "I trust your flight was educational." The pause before the final word suggested layers of meaning that would be discussed away from curious ears. "Yes, sir," Phoenix replied, maintaining the professional demeanor that had served her throughout her career. Comprehensive documentation was achieved as requested. Her military training provided the words, but her mind was processing the implications of her father's connection to what she'd observed. The facility in the valley wasn't just a hidden installation. It was part of a larger network that had been operating since her father's era of service. One of the unknown officers stepped forward, a woman with the bearing of someone accustomed to handling sensitive situations. "Captain, I'm Major General Patricia Morrison, Defense Intelligence Agency. We need to discuss your observations in a controlled environment." The mention of the DIA confirmed Phoenix's suspicions about the mission's true nature. This wasn't a routine debrief. It was an evaluation of her suitability for operations that existed in the shadows of official military doctrine. The maintenance crew began their post-flight inspection with unusual thoroughness, suggesting that her aircraft's sensor recordings would be analyzed by specialists beyond the squadron level. Phoenix watched her F-16 being serviced while mentally preparing for questions that would probe not just her observations, but her psychological readiness for whatever role she was being recruited to fill. As they walked toward the squadron building, Phoenix caught sight of Lieutenant Mitchell and several other pilots watching from the ready room windows. Their earlier mockery about her special assignments now seemed prophetic in ways they couldn't understand. She had indeed received special treatment, but the reasons went far deeper than single motherhood or perceived weakness. Her father's legacy had apparently made her a person of interest to organizations that operated beyond standard military channels. The briefing room they entered was equipped with security measures she hadn't seen before: soundproofing, electronic countermeasures, and recording equipment that suggested every word would be analyzed. Major General Morrison gestured for Phoenix to take a seat, while Colonel Webb positioned himself at the door like a guardian of secrets. The real debrief was about to begin, and Phoenix sensed that her answers would determine whether she remained a regular Air Force pilot or became something else entirely. The briefing room's atmosphere grew thick with anticipation as Major General Morrison activated the security protocols. Electronic hums filled the air as jamming devices ensured their conversation would remain private from any surveillance attempts. Phoenix had never been in a room with this level of security clearance, and the gravity of the situation began to settle over her like a lead blanket. Whatever they were about to discuss went beyond classified into the realm of secrets that could reshape nations. "Captain Nakamura," Major General Morrison began, settling into her chair with the confidence of someone accustomed to handling explosive information. "Your reconnaissance today was not your first encounter with the facility you observed. Your father conducted similar missions over that same valley 15 years ago." She opened a thick folder that Phoenix recognized as her complete service record, but with sections she'd never seen before, pages that had been classified above her security clearance. The revelation hit Phoenix with unexpected emotional force. Her father's death had been the defining tragedy of her childhood, but she'd never questioned the official story about a training accident. Military families learned to accept such explanations without probing deeper. "Ma'am, I was told my father died during routine flight exercises," she managed to say, her voice maintaining professional control despite the turmoil in her chest. Colonel Webb stepped forward with an expression that mixed sympathy and necessity. "Your father was part of Operation Silent Eagle, a joint intelligence program with allied nations that required absolute secrecy. The facility you observed today was established during his era of service as a forward operating base for missions that couldn't be officially acknowledged." He paused, allowing the information to settle. "His death wasn't accidental, Captain. He was shot down while conducting reconnaissance similar to your mission today." The words struck Phoenix like physical blows. Her father had been killed in action, not lost to mechanical failure. Every memorial service, every flag ceremony, every moment of childhood grief had been built on a necessary lie designed to protect operational security. She felt a mix of pride and rage, pride that her father had died serving his country in ways that truly mattered, and rage that she'd been denied the truth for so long. "The tattoo beneath your collar," Major General Morrison continued, "is your father's unit insignia. He had it created as a symbol of their classified service, and only unit members were authorized to wear it. The fact that you chose to have it tattooed on your body suggests either remarkable intuition or inherited memories that we don't fully understand." She leaned forward slightly. "How did you know about that symbol, Captain?" Phoenix's hand moved instinctively to her collar, feeling the raised skin where the tattoo marked her as her father's daughter. "I found it in his personal effects after he died," she said quietly. "A sketch in one of his flight manuals with a note that said, 'For Phoenix, when you're ready to fly with eagles.' I thought it was just something he'd drawn for me." The memory of discovering that sketch at age 16 came flooding back. the moment she decided to make her father's mysterious symbol a permanent part of her identity. The two senior officers exchanged glances that suggested her answer had significant implications. Phoenix began to understand that her presence in this room wasn't coincidental. She'd been observed, evaluated, and ultimately selected for this mission based on factors that went far beyond her flying abilities. Her father's legacy had made her a candidate for operations that existed in the same shadows where he'd served and died. "Captain," Major General Morrison said with finality, "we're prepared to offer you a choice. You can return to regular squadron duties with no further involvement in classified operations, or you can continue your father's work with full knowledge of what that service entails." The weight of the decision settled over Phoenix like a flight suit she'd never be able to remove. The silence in the briefing room stretched for what felt like hours as Phoenix processed the magnitude of the choice before her. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the normal rhythm of base operations continuing, aircraft launching and recovering, ground crews servicing jets, pilots walking between buildings with the casual confidence of routine military life. That world suddenly seemed impossibly distant from where she now sat, balanced on the edge of a decision that would define the remainder of her career and potentially her life. Major General Morrison allowed the silence to extend, recognizing that some decisions couldn't be rushed. Phoenix's mind raced through the implications of accepting whatever role they were offering. Classified operations meant extended separations from Emma, dangerous missions with no official acknowledgement, and involvement in activities that could never be discussed with family or friends. But it also meant continuing her father's legacy in ways she'd never imagined possible. "Ma'am," Phoenix finally said, her voice steady despite the emotional turbulence beneath, "what exactly did my father's unit accomplish? What was worth his life and the secrecy that followed?" The question carried weight beyond professional curiosity. She needed to understand what cause had cost her a father and might now separate her from her daughter. Colonel Webb opened another folder, this one marked with security classifications that Phoenix had only heard whispered about in intelligence briefings. Operation Silent Eagle prevented 3 major international incidents that could have destabilized the entire region, he explained. Your father and his team provided intelligence that stopped arms shipments to terrorist organizations, documented war crimes that led to international prosecutions, and identified sleeper cells that were planning attacks on civilian targets. He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "Their work saved thousands of lives, Captain. Lives that were never endangered because of intelligence gathered in valleys like the one you observed today." The facility she documented suddenly took on new significance. It wasn't just a hidden military installation. It was part of an ongoing operation that had been protecting civilian populations for over a decade. Phoenix began to understand that her reconnaissance mission had been both an evaluation of her capabilities and a continuation of work that had been temporarily suspended after her father's death. Someone had decided it was time to reactivate that program, and her genetic and professional qualifications made her the logical candidate to continue the mission. "The unit you're being invited to join," Major General Morrison continued, "operates under the designation Task Force Phoenix. Your father suggested the name before his final mission, apparently anticipating that his daughter might someday continue his work." The personal connection sent shivers down Phoenix's spine. Her call sign, which she'd chosen in honor of her father's memory, had actually been his prediction about her future service. Emma's face flashed through Phoenix's mind, her bright smile during their morning goodbye, her excited chatter about school projects, her proud declaration that Mommy flies the fastest planes in the sky. Accepting this assignment would mean missing more bedtime stories, more soccer games, more of the precious moments that defined their relationship. But it also meant ensuring that Emma grew up in a world made safer by her mother's service, just as Phoenix had unknowingly benefited from her father's sacrifice. "If I accept," Phoenix asked carefully, "what happens to my daughter? What support systems are in place for families of unit members? The question revealed her priorities as clearly as any psychological evaluation could have accomplished. She was a mother first, pilot second, and any organization that wanted her service would need to accommodate both roles. Major General Morrison smiled for the first time since entering the room. Captain, Task Force Phoenix was designed around the understanding that our most effective operators often have the strongest personal motivations for their service. Emma will receive educational support, family services, and security protection that exceeds anything available through standard military channels. She leaned forward slightly. Your father insisted on those provisions before accepting his assignment. He understood that protecting his family was inseparable from protecting his country. The decision crystallized in Phoenix's mind with the sudden clarity that came during critical moments in flight, the instant when multiple variables aligned, and the correct course of action became obvious despite its complexity. Her father had faced this same choice 15 years ago, balancing family responsibilities against national service, and he'd found a way to honor both commitments. The tattoo beneath her collar seemed to pulse with inherited purpose as she prepared to accept a legacy she'd unknowingly carried her entire adult life. Ma'am, Phoenix said, her voice carrying the confidence that had earned her respect in cockpits from Nevada to Afghanistan, I accept assignment to Task Force Phoenix. The words felt both momentous and inevitable, as if she'd been rehearsing them her entire career without realizing it. When do I begin? Major General Morrison nodded with satisfaction that suggested this outcome had been anticipated, if not entirely predetermined. Your first mission begins in 72 hours. You'll return to the facility you observed today, but this time your objectives will extend beyond reconnaissance. She slid a new set of orders across the table, these bearing security classifications that Phoenix had never seen before. Task Force Phoenix operates on the principle that some threats require immediate response rather than extended intelligence gathering. The implications were clear. She was transitioning from observer to operator, from documenting threats to neutralizing them. Phoenix felt a familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with apprehension, the same combination that preceded every combat mission she'd ever flown. But this time, the stakes extended beyond her own survival or even her squadron's success. She was accepting responsibility for operations that could influence the stability of entire regions. Colonel Webb stepped forward with what appeared to be a ceremonial case. These belong to your father, he said, opening the container to reveal flight wings unlike any Phoenix had seen before. The standard pilot wings were overlaid with an intricate design that incorporated the same symbol as her tattoo, an eagle with outstretched wings surrounded by stars arranged in a pattern that suggested both protection and vigilance. He never had the chance to pass them on personally. Phoenix accepted the wings with hands that trembled slightly despite her efforts at professional composure. The metal was warm to the touch, as if it had absorbed something of her father's spirit during its years of storage. Pinning them to her flight suit felt like completing a circuit that had been broken 15 years ago, connecting her present service to his interrupted legacy. Your cover identity remains unchanged, Major General Morrison explained as Phoenix examined the wings that now marked her as something beyond a regular Air Force pilot. To your squadron, you'll continue flying standard missions. Your Task Force Phoenix assignments will be explained as additional training or special reconnaissance duties. This compartmentalization is essential for operational security and your family's safety. The briefing room began to feel less like an interrogation chamber and more like a threshold between two distinct phases of her life. Phoenix understood that she was crossing from the world of conventional military service into something that existed in the shadows of official doctrine. Her father had made this same transition, accepting responsibilities that could never be fully shared with the people he loved most. "Ma'am," Phoenix asked, recognizing that some questions needed answers before she could fully commit to this path, "what happened to the other members of my father's unit? Are any of them still active? The question carried implications about mentorship, support, and survival rates that would help her understand what she was truly accepting. Major General Morrison's expression grew somber. Task Force Phoenix was disbanded after your father's death, she replied quietly. You'll be rebuilding the unit from the ground up, with resources and authority that reflect lessons learned from their experience. The weight of that responsibility settled over Phoenix like a flight suit tailored for giants. She wasn't just continuing her father's work, she was becoming the foundation for its resurrection. The weight of rebuilding Task Force Phoenix settled over Phoenix like atmospheric pressure at high altitude, invisible but undeniably present. As Major General Morrison detailed the scope of her new responsibilities, Phoenix began to understand that accepting this assignment meant more than continuing her father's mission. She was becoming the cornerstone of an operation that would require recruiting and training personnel for activities that officially didn't exist. Your first objective, Major General Morrison continued, consulting a tablet that required biometric authentication to access, is to establish operational protocols for intelligence gathering and direct action missions throughout the region. The facility you observe today is one of several installations that require immediate assessment and potential neutralization. She swiped through satellite imagery that showed similar installations across Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. These sites represent a coordinated effort by unknown actors to establish military capabilities that could destabilize the entire region. Phoenix studied the images with the analytical eye that had made her an effective reconnaissance pilot. Each facility shared common characteristics, hidden locations, sophisticated air defenses, and infrastructure capable of supporting significant military operations. Someone with substantial resources and strategic vision had invested in creating a network of shadow bases that could project power across international boundaries without official acknowledgement. The intelligence community has been monitoring these installations for 18 months, Colonel Webb added, but standard reconnaissance methods have proven insufficient for understanding their full capabilities or intentions. Task Force Phoenix will employ more direct methods of intelligence gathering. The euphemism was clear. They were discussing infiltration, sabotage, and if necessary, targeted strikes against facilities that couldn't be officially targeted. The scope of the mission began to clarify in Phoenix's mind like flight instruments emerging from fog. She wasn't just being asked to fly reconnaissance missions. She was being tasked with developing and executing a comprehensive strategy to neutralize a threat that conventional military forces couldn't address. The isolation she'd felt during her morning's mission suddenly made sense. She'd been conducting a final evaluation before being handed responsibility for operations that could influence the balance of power across multiple nations. Personnel selection for your unit will begin immediately, Major General Morrison explained, sliding another folder across the table. We've identified candidates from special operations forces, intelligence agencies, and elite pilot programs who meet the psychological and professional criteria for Task Force Phoenix membership. Phoenix opened the folder to find dossiers on individuals whose service records read like action movie plots: Delta Force operators, CIA field officers, test pilots who'd flown aircraft that weren't supposed to exist. The magnitude of the resources being placed at her disposal was both empowering and terrifying. Phoenix realized that her acceptance of this assignment had triggered the activation of a program that had been years in development. Someone at the highest levels of government had been planning Task Force Phoenix's resurrection, waiting for the right moment and the right leader to bring it back to operational status. "Ma'am," Phoenix asked, setting down the personnel files to focus on a more immediate concern, "what's the timeline for full operational capability? How soon before Task Force Phoenix can engage these threats effectively?" Her military training emphasized realistic planning over optimistic projections, and the scope of their mission suggested a complex development process. 6 weeks, Major General Morrison replied with a directness that brooked no discussion. Intelligence indicates that the facilities you've identified are preparing for coordinated operations that could begin within 2 months. Task Force Phoenix must be capable of preemptive action before that deadline. The compressed timeline added another layer of pressure to an already overwhelming assignment. Phoenix nodded, mentally shifting into the planning mode that had helped her survive complex missions throughout her career. 6 weeks to recruit and train a specialized unit, develop operational protocols, and prepare for missions that could prevent regional conflict. The challenge was daunting, but she'd faced impossible odds before. The difference now was that failure wouldn't just mean her own death. It could mean the deaths of thousands of civilians and the destabilization of an entire region of the world. The next 72 hours blurred together in a whirlwind of classified briefings, personnel interviews, and logistical preparations that made Phoenix's previous military experience seem like elementary training. Her temporary office in a secure section of Bagram had become command.